Hi, Go-Goddess. Welcome to our session for this week for the 6 weeks intro to web development. So, with that being said, let's start coding. So, where do we start coding from? We need an environment, right? Anything in life, when you start to work or you need to do some work, you need to do it somewhere. So, we choose environment called Visual Studio Code. This is just our IDE. So, how do we do that? We need to download it to our machine. You go to your browser, and it can be any browser of your choice or your preference. And then you open a new tab in your browser pen. You just type download. So for any software that you need to download, right? I prefer to just type the word download, the name of the particular software. In this case, it's download Visual Studio Code. So mine is appearing here because I've done it several times, but you just need to type it as it is, right? And you hit enter. When you've done that, you just need to go and select the one that you need to download. I prefer this particular one, right? That gives me options to download for the different types of operating systems that are available, which are Linux, Windows, and Mac. And because I'm using Windows, right, then I'm gonna go and then just download Windows right here. And after doing that, once it's on my machine, I must just make sure that I open it and I install it on my machine. All right. So having done that, after doing that, I'm just going to open my Visual Studio Code because I've done installing. I'm finished with that process. And then the next step, right, would be to create a folder or a directory as it is called in coding terms. Your directory is just the main directory, the project folder that you're going to be populating the files that you need. The files, meaning that where you're going to be doing the coding so that you can see or you can view in your browser what you have done. So with that being said, I've created one on my desktop and I've named it first underscore web page because when you are creating a folder for coding in your VS Code, if it's 2 words, just make sure that you separate it with an underscore, or if it's 3 words, make sure it's an underscore. If it's 1 word, then it's still fine. You just need to write it as it is. So when I've created my folder, right, on my desktop or in my document section of my computer, I just simply go and extract it here. I click File, I go and open my folder, right, to select that folder where I've created it. In my case, I created in my desktop. You've created on a document, then click Documents. Then I look for it. It's first underscore web page, right? And then I select the folder. Then it comes on my VS Code. Then I can start working. All right. In this case, I'm going to delete this so that I can start from scratch so that you can understand how to create a file. So after creating your folder, you need to go here and open a new file. To create a new file, you give it a name. In this case, I'm going to call it index.html. And of course, you can give it any name that is relevant to what you're doing. It can be home.html, whatever it is. But in this case, the reason why I put index is because it is conventional and it is highly recommended across all platforms to indicate that it's the first page, first point of call. Then I hit enter. On my right, you can see my cursor that's flickering there, right? So this is where we actually do the coding. And one thing I like about VS Code is that it's got some very cool features, which I'm going to demonstrate just now. I'm going to generate the boilerplate or the template code, which is just the project's initial structure. How to do that? I'm going to press down Shift, right? And I'm going to press down 1 so that I can type out an exclamation mark. Immediately after doing that, then I'm going to press down the tab key on my keyboard. So let me just repeat that quickly. It's Shift 1 so that we can type out exclamation mark, and then immediately, simultaneously, you hit your tab button on your keyboard, right? So this generates our code structure for the HTML document. It's just an initial page, which is quite helpful because with other editors, you might actually need to type this out one line at a time. And sometimes it's very tedious and you can't remember some of the things that you need. So I will explain what's happening here so that we can understand, we can be on the same page. Now, on line 1, we've got doctype HTML. Doctype standing for document type, telling us what type of language are we using, and the type of language that we are using right here to develop this particular page is called HTML. So when I speak of language, it's a programming language. There are other languages out there, JavaScript, C Sharp, Bootstrap. It only depends with what you're trying to do. In this case, we're trying to create a static web page, something that we can see. We can't use it, but we can see it. And then on line 2, we specify the language. That is the language that we're going to be using, which is English, which is more or less like the universal language, but there are languages that other countries develop in. And we've got the head element from line 3 to line 8, right? So inside our head element, right, we don't necessarily see it on our page. It's something that is running behind the scenes, but it's working for us. So it's working, it's doing some work for us, generating certain things, but we don't see them, right? So I'm going to explain, for instance, in line 4, we see that we've got a meta character set. So meta is just the metadata, information about this particular page. So meta charset, meta character set, it's just set to UTF-8, meaning that this is the encoding. Encoding to translate machine language to human readable language. Machines understand, or they encode, or they do things in zeros and ones. Now those zeros and ones, then they're translated to what we can actually work with, right? Like for instance, what we can see here, we can read that. And then we see on line 5 that the default browser would be the IE, Internet Explorer Edge, right? If I'm going to run it in a certain way, then it's going to pop out in IE, although I've set mine to Chrome for a specific reasons. It's just a matter of preferences, guys. It's nothing that's important. And then on line 6, right, we just see that our width, the width of the screen has been set to an initial scale of 1.0. And then by default, we've got a title that comes in as document. We need to change that. Every time you generate this code, right, it is coming up as document. So we're going to give it something that is relevant to what we actually do. So every time we are putting in any names, right, just make sure they are relevant to what the project is all about. So in our case, it's introduction to web development, web dev. I'm gonna leave it there, web dev, just for web developments. Then after that, what I'm gonna do, I'm going to run this code so that you can see that inside the head element, we've got stuff, but there's nothing that we have done so far. And just to show that everything is working, but we don't get to do anything at this point or to see anything before we start to populate the code, the actual code. So I'm going to open this. This is just to run the page in the browser. But there's several ways to do it, right? You can open with something, you can reveal in an Explorer. If I reveal this, I'm going to open in the Internet Explorer. But for the purposes of learning, and I recommend as well that you go and you copy your path, right? When you copy your path, you just copy your relevant URL, right? And you go to the browser, come back here, open a new tab, you right click and paste our URL, the one that we have copied, right? You enter, hit enter on your keyboard. Fine. Now we see that there is nothing, right? We just see this blank page, but there's something that's actually happening. In the reason that, remember I said initially that I created my folder on the desktop. That's my desktop on my computer, right? So it's showing that this is the destination, file destination, desktop. And then inside, I created a folder that I called first web page, right? So this is the first web page. Then again, I went and I created a file which I called index.html. So this is our index.html, our first point of call, our homepage. So let's go back to VS Code and start populating something that we can see. Next, after the head element, we've got what we call a body, right? So inside our body here, right, this is where we start to create something or to write code that is going to show us something in our browser. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a heading, right? But we've got different types of headings. They vary from H1 to H6. So H headings, this is just the tag or the element that we use to create or to put in a heading. So when we do it this way, it's sorry, let me just, it's H1, like I said, let me just repeat that. H1, type that, right? H1. So H1, it only means that it is the highest level of the headings. It's a bigger or a larger and bolder looking heading. So inside our tag, we don't type it outside here. We must make sure that we type it here, right? And we're saying we type whatever it is that we want. In this case, I'll just say this is a larger and bolder border heading, right? We save that and then we go back to our browser so that we can see that everything is working. We refresh that. Here we go. We've run, we've run and we've written our first line of code, which is an H1 or a heading. So let's go and try and populate or create a smaller heading. And we're going to do it by H, typing H. Maybe let's put it on H6 so that we can prove that it's a much smaller heading, which is, so this is a smaller heading, right? Or the smallest heading. This is, it's actually the smallest heading. This is the smallest heading, right? So it varies from H1 to 6 because of the size. So if you need a better, maybe something the size that is a bit average, then you need maybe to put or use H2 or H3. It all depends with you guys. It's just about what you want or how you want some text or content to appear. So when we save that, we go and we refresh. Yeah, as we can see, we've got a small, very small heading here, right? Let's go back and create a paragraph. So to create a paragraph, we use what we call a p tag, right? So some things are represented in letters, but not necessarily in letters. It will depend with what you are trying to do. We've got things like attributes where we've got things like img to represent an image. So it's not necessarily about a one letter, but in this case, a paragraph is represented by a p tag. Inside our p tag, we're going to write the text or the content that you want. So this is a paragraph. See, we save that and then refresh. There we go. So guys, this is how we start coding, and I hope you enjoyed the session. See you next time. Bye.